Hello, and welcome back to the Temple of Aphrodite Biodotis. This is our midweek lecture. On this episode, we will be talking about the mythical origins of Aphrodite. So, let's get into it. So, as far as where we get our information from, there are several people. They cover many centuries. Hesiod, in his Theogony, is probably the most commonly quoted source as far as, where Aphrodite came from. Other sources include, we have Homeric hymns, again, Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and who is quite frequently debated as more than likely being more than one person. We have Diodorus, we have Pausanias, Orpheus, we have Ovid, Seneca, and Apuleius. So we're not going to talk about the authors in this particular lecture, but we will talk about them in other lectures when we talk about our sources. But these are the folks who most of what we know about Aphrodite, these are the folks that it comes from. So we're going to start off, we're going to just kind of look through these and kind of dissect them, talk a little bit about them, mull them over, So the first one here is, of course, Hesiod's Theogony. Again, the most quoted one, most referenced one. So we have Uranos, which translates to the sky or the heavens, came, bringing on night and longing for love. He lay about Gaia, who is the personification of the earth, spreading himself full upon her. Then the sun, Kronos, from his ambush stretched forth his left hand, and in his right took the great long sickle with jagged teeth, and swiftly lopped off his own father's members, and cast them away to fall behind him. And so, soon as he had cut off the members with the flint, and cast them from the land into the surging sea, they were swept away over the main a long time. And a white foam spread around them from the immortal flesh, and in it there grew a maiden. First she drew near the holy Cythera, and from there afterwards she came to the sea-girt Kypros, and came forth an awful and lovely goddess, and grass grew up about her beneath her shapely feet. Her, which I think this is a typo, I think it's supposed to be here, gods and men call Aphrodite. No, her is right. Her, gods and men call Aphrodite, and Aphrogynia, the foam-born, because she grew amid the foam, and well-crowned Eustephanos Cythera, because she reached Cythera, and Cryptogenis, because she was born in billowy Kypros, and Philomedes, genital loving, because sprang from the members. And with her went Eros, love, and comely Heremos, desire, followed her at her birth, and followed her at her birth, and the first, and as she went into the assembly of the gods, this honor she has from the beginning, and this is the portion allotted to her amongst men and undying gods, the whisperings of maidens and smiles of deceits, with sweet delight and love and graciousness. So there's quite a bit to unpack there. So we'll start from the top. So, sky covers the ground. We know that, right? Sky is above the ground. And so what you have happen is you have time stretching out its hand, cutting off a bit of the sky or heaven, and then casting it away. Now, something that's very interesting about the word cast. He casts it not onto the earth, not onto the ground, but he casts it behind him into the ocean. Now, I thought that is very interesting because normally when you cast something out or cast it away, you're throwing it. Normally because it's bad, right? Um, so I thought to myself, well, why did he throw it? Why didn't it just fall to the ground? Well, if you are a fan of Randall Carlson, or maybe you listen to some of his podcasts like Cosmographia, there is clear comet impact depiction here in my mind, and I could be completely wrong. So this is my theory. I did not read this anywhere, but something fell from the heavens, landed in the ocean. Now we know that life began in the ocean, and according to the theory of panspermia, we know or we believe that the seeds of life, the elements of life, the chemicals, the proteins and whatnot, would have come in to our planet from small icy bodies, comets, and interstellar objects, right? So we have the comet hitting the water, and it's not in this one, but there we'll see in other myths how the sea will boil, it will be tumultuous, it will roll, it will froth. And if you want to say, okay, well, that's tidal action, that's the foam, that's the ocean doing its thing, which, by the way, from what I understand, is what brought about life, in the fact that with tidal motion you have essentially the act of distillation, which, if we didn't have a moon, if we didn't have tides, wouldn't have happened. So the water would have been stagnant instead of living. So I think there's a really cool parallel there, and I might talk about that in a later episode. But getting back to it, so he cuts off. Kronos cuts off Uranus's members. Why does he do that? Well, it's because in this myth, Gaia, who the Earth, is just sick of constantly having sex with her husband, and so she's all like, Kronos, do me a solid. We need to stop this. Here's a flint sickle. You know what to do. And I'm not going to get into the graphic detail, but he does the deed, and then he tosses it off. So, he reaches out with his left hand, and with his right hand took a great long sickle with jagged teeth, swiftly lopped off his father's member, and cast it behind him. And as soon as it had cut off his member with the flint and cast it from the land into the surging sea, they were swept away over the main a long time. So basically, this thing, this gory mass, is in the ocean, interacting with the sea, and it is there for a long time. Now, why is it long time important? Well, I think that might be there to suggest the travel of people. And we'll get more into that as we go through the slides. But the travel of people from one society to the next area, spreading their beliefs. The Mediterranean's, it's not massive, but it's, you're not going to be swimming across it. So a long time. And a white foam spread around them from the immortal flesh, and it there grew a maiden. Now, some translations have said girl, but this specifically says maiden. So for those of us who are not necessarily familiar with maiden, maiden is going to be someone who is a young woman who is unmarried. To the ancient Greeks, they married rather young, so this could have been someone who would have been basically like a teenager almost. So a young woman, unmarried, and unbegotten as well. She was not born of anyone. She was born unto herself, which I think one of these points out in another slide. First, she drew near holy Cythera, and from there afterwards she came to the sea-girt Kypros, and came forth an awful and lovely goddess. So, Cythera, or Cythera, as it's known today, it's where the Antikytheran device was found, is a small island just south of Greece. It is technically part of Greece, but it's just south of the Peloponnese. And I'll bring them up here in a bit. But that's west, fully in the Mediterranean. And then Kypros is Cyprus. And that is further east. That's closer to the Levant, right? Closer to Turkey and in the Middle East areas. So here is saying that she traveled west to east. And that's important. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. All right. And fourth, an awful and lovely goddess. So, what is awful? So we think of the word awesome a lot. And for something to be awful basically means it is full of awe. So what does that mean? Well, basically, it's nothing good. In fact, it's something so good that it has actually wound up being bad. It is terrible, terrific, which that word too, we have kind of perverted into being something good. It is something which is mind-bendingly just out of this world. It's terrifying. So she's terrible and lovely. So that right there is the great breadth of what she can do with her powers over love. And grass grew up about her, beneath her shapely feet. So even her feet are perfectly shaped, and the grass grew up about her. So, and I want to say in one of the other ones, it'll bring this up again, it's not that there's grass in the ground that she is bringing out, such as what Demeter does when Demeter helps us grow our crops to feed ourselves. No, she is taking barren, sandy soil. She's on a beach, and grass is spontaneously coming. She is creating life out of nothing in this. So, her gods and men call Aphrodite. Now, Aphrodite, that's a very interesting name. We'll get into maybe some etymology a little bit later. Just know that one of the theories, which is half-heartedly accepted, meanings foam arisen, which really kind of fits. So they call her Aphrodite. They also call her Aphrogynia, meaning foam born. So genia, genesis, right? Genitive. And Aphro, foam. Because she grew amid the foam, and well-crowned Eustephanos, Cytherea, because she reached Cythera, and Cyprogenes, because she was born in billowy Kypros. Now, here I think we have a bit of a problem. Because if you'll just recall, a minute ago I said this story says she travels from west to east, Cytherea to Kypros. And here we have the opposite. She was born in Kypros and traveled to Cytherea, which is weird. because if you look up a couple of lines, it says, first she drew near holy Kythera, and from there afterwards she came to the sea-girt Kypros. So there's a contradiction there. And I'm not entirely sure how to really consolidate it, honestly, except for maybe that she was blown past Kythera, went to Kypros, and then came back to Kytheria, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, let's see. And she was also known as Philomedes, which means genital loving, because she sprang from the members, so from the genitalia of Ouranos, from the genitals of heaven. And with her went Eros, who is the personification of love, as well as comely, which means beautiful, Heremos, not Heremos, Hieramos, who is desire. So they followed her at her birth, at the first, and as she went into the assembly of the gods. So basically, this is saying that, Aphrodite, she was born, and then when she came into her own, she was accepted into being, an Olympian. So this clearly shows she was not born of any of the Olympians. That will change as history progresses. So she was accepted into the assembly of the gods with both Eros and Himeros. This honor she has from the beginning. So she's an Olympian. That is her honor. And this is the portion allotted to her amongst the men and the undying gods. So her reign, her area. We have the whisperings of maidens. So the gossip, speaking of love and of life and of children. And smiles and deceits with sweet delight and love and graciousness. So we have the double-edged sword of love. And this also really kind of plays into how the ancient Greeks felt about love, because it was thought of something that shouldn't be trusted, because it can cloud your judgment and it can really override just about anything else. Okay, so that is Hesiod's Theogony. And next, we have a Homeric hymn. To sea-set Kypros, the moist breath of the western wind, Zephyros, wafted her, Aphrodite, over the waves of the loud moaning sea in soft foam. And there the gold-filleted Horai, seasons, welcomed her joyously. They clothed her with heavenly garments. On her head they put a fine, well-wrought crown of gold, and in her pierced ears they hung ornaments of orichalc and precious gold, and adorned her with golden necklaces over her soft neck and snow-white breasts, jewels which the gold-filleted Horai wear themselves whenever they go to their father's house to join the lovely dances of the gods. And when they had fully decked her, they brought her to the gods, who welcomed her when they saw her, giving her their hands. Each one of them prayed that he might lead her home to be his wedded wife. So greatly were they amazed at her beauty of violet-crowned Cytherea. So, this is almost an addition to the previous myth. It slots really nicely. So she's born on Cyprus. She is then transported to Cytherea, and on the way she is given her raiments and jewelry by the seasons. You will also see the Charites, or the Charities, referenced in some of these myths, being the ones who bathe and clothe her. So, this really is, when you think of the birth of Venus, I think the guy's name is Botticelli. This is really kind of what you have in your mind. Um, a beautiful blonde woman standing on a half shell with, you know, bejeweled and yet not quite robed, or maybe in the process of being robed, right? So that's what this is. All right, moving on. We have this one, Aphrodite roaming over the waves like sea lettuce, so like seaweed, moving her soft-skinned body in her voyage over the white, calm sea. She pulls the breakers along her path. Above her rosy breast and below her soft neck, a great wave divides her skin. In the midst of this furrow, like a lily wound among violets, Cyprus shines out from the calm sea. Over the silver on dancing dolphins ride guileful Eros and laughing Himeros, and the chorus of bow-backed fish plunging in the waves sports with Paphia where she swims. So for this one, we have, of course, Aphrodite roaming amongst the waves like a piece of debris, almost organic debris, right? She is on a voyage over the white calm sea, all right? And then we see she pulls breakers along with her path. So basically, she is creating a wake as she comes to shore, essentially. Now, the next part is a little different. I think the next part is a metaphor. So, above her rosy breast and below her soft neck, a great wave divides the skin. Now, I really don't know how to interpret this other than to say that they're describing her cleavage. Like, that's about as bluntly as I can say it. And it makes a little bit of sense if you go into the next one. In the midst of the furrow, so right between, in her, right between her breast, in her bosom, in her heart, if you will, like a lily wound among violets, Cyprus, which is not only her name, but also the island of Cyprus, shines out from the calm sea. So you have the island of Cyprus in her bosom, in her heart, because that is her home. And going down to the last one, you see fish plunging in the waves, sports with Paphia, where she swims. So Paphia, another name for Aphrodite. Paphia coming from the place name Paphos, which is her birthplace, her city in Cyprus. Then we'll come back up where it talks about Eros and Hieremos. So you have guileful Eros, so guile, cunning, but also you get a bit of deceit in there. You're cunning, but you're willing to pull the shades over someone to get them to do what you want. You're manipulative in a way. And then you have Desire, who she's laughing, she's just having a good time, riding a dolphin like a sea-doo, I guess, right? So there's that. Then we have Diodorus here. Aphrodite, they say, as she was journeying after her birth in the sea, from Kythera to Kypros, and dropped anchor near Rhodes, was prevented from stopping there by the sons of Poseidon, who were arrogant and insolent men. Whereupon the goddess, in her wrath, brought a madness upon them. So this is an interim, right? So she is traveling from Kythera to Kypros, which again, it's going to be west to east, traveling toward the Levant, right? And she stops off at Rhodes, which is another island just off the southwestern corner of Turkey. And the sons of Poseidon, who is the god of the ocean, he is the Olympian god of the ocean, won't let her anchor there. And so she brings upon them madness. Now, they doesn't say what kind of madness it is, but love can definitely be maddening. So that's there. So we get some other ones here. These are shorter. Some of these two are from Pausanias. So this one describes a throne of Zeus. You have Eros receiving Aphrodite as she rises from the sea, thus saying that love was born, or erotic love was around prior to Aphrodite, as was persuasion, Pythio, or Pytho. Then we have depiction of the base of the statue of Poseidon at Corinth. You have the sea, Thalassa, holding up the young Aphrodite as it would. She's floating above the sea and being with the nymphs. And then we have the nymphs referred to again here, sea nymphs, that she loved them so much when she was called to become an Olympian, she asked to bring them with her, and Zeus said no. Okay. So, obviously, they're not going to make everybody an Olympian, I don't guess. Moving on, we have this one's the Orphic Hymn 55. Aphrodite, sea-born, Kypros, thy famed mother fair. So, Pontogenes, basically is sea-born. So this one I classified as saying that, this one is saying that, yes, she was born on Cyprus. Next, we have out of the sea was rising lovely crowned Kypris, foam blossoms still upon her hair, and round her hovered smiling witchingly Hieromus, and danced the Charites lovely tressed. So I think it's funny how you have desire there, and she's smiling witchingly. That's some imagery right there. And then lovely tressed is it's another word for dressed. And then we have Ovid in the Metamorphosis. This is the Roman period. This is no longer in Greek, so we've moved on into the Roman period. Aphrodite, should find some favor with the sea, for it in its holy depths in days gone by from sea foam I was formed, and still from foam I take my name in Greece. So then this here is referring back to the possibility that Aphrodite, meaning foam arisen. And then Ovid, we have the Herades, for 'twas from the sea in Catherian waters, so runs the tale, that the mother of the Amores undraped arose. So Amores coming from amor, which is love, right? So taking that to Greek, it's Erotes. Seneca, thou goddess, born of the cruel sea, who art called mother of both Cupids. So we're looking at Eros and Himeros being, love and desire, being the two Cupids. Then Epeleus, the goddess Aphrodite, who was sprung from the dark blue depths of the sea and was nurtured by the foam from the frothing waves. Continuing on, the clouds parted, and Caelus, heaven, or Uranus, admitted his daughter. So now this one I think is very interesting, because it's not that his daughter was cut from him, but rather he let something through. He brought something into the world. So that, to me, that seems more of a, something came from the sky. Something fell from the sky. So there's that line. We just have a handful more here. So, quote, did not the water conceive Aphrodite by a heavenly husbandry, and bring her forth from the deeps? Kronos cut off his father's loins with unmanning sickle, until the foam got a mind and made the water shape itself into a self-perfected birth, delivered of Aphrodite from the sea. So I think that is also very interesting. In those two, you have heavenly husbandry, right? Comes from heaven. She's literally a part of heaven. She is the genitals of heaven. And then you have the self-perfected birth, because she was not she was not begotten. She gave birth unto herself. So that's also, something to think about. He, Kronos, cut off his father's male plowshare, which is a very different word than some of you probably are familiar with, and sowed the teeming deep with seed on the unsown back of the daughter-begetting sea. So here is a little bit of a twist. So they're saying the sea, Thalassa, is actually the one who brought forth Aphrodite. Now, I'm not entirely sure. Thalassa here is capitalized, so I would assume that it is a proper noun. So we might attribute here that Uranus and Thalassa are the ones who are the parents to Aphrodite. Next, when the fertile drops of Uranus spilt with a mess of male gore, hand given infant shape to the fertile foam and brought forth Paphia, which again is Aphrodite. And then the last one here on this slide, Kypros, god-welcoming island of the fine-feathered Erotes, which bears the name of Kypros, the self-born Aphrodite. Paphos, garland harbor of the soft-haired Erotes, landing place of Aphrodite, when she came up out of the waves, where is the bride bath of the sea-born goddess. So here we have the idea again that the Erotes, being Eros and Himeros, were around before Aphrodite, and we have it in such a way that they are on Cyprus, that being their home. And then it talks about the bride bath of the sea-born goddess. So there is a harbor at Paphos, which is where she bathes, she swims. And in fact, I want to say they talk about her going to Paphos in the myth where she... which one is it? It's the Anchises and Aeneas one. She goes to prepare herself before she goes and beds a mortal. But she bathes, I'm fairly certain, she's bathed by the season. It's either the Seasons or the Charities. They're at Paphos. And then last slide, this is the last one. Before Kypros and the Isthmian city of Corinth, she, being the city of Beor or Beirut, first received Kypros within her welcoming portal, newly born from the brine, when the water impregnated from the furrow of Oronus was delivered of deep-sea Aphrodite, when without marriage the seed plowed the flood with male fertility, and of itself shaped the foam into a daughter. And Physis, which is nature, was the midwife. Coming up with the goddess there was the embroidered strap, which ran round her loins like a belt, set about the queen's body in a girdle of itself. Bero, or Beirut, first received Kypros, and above the neighboring roads, the meadows of themselves put out plants of grass and flowers on all sides. In the sandy bay, the beach became ruddy with clumps of roses. There, as soon as she was seen on the neighboring harborage, she brought forth wild Eros without a nurse, and Eros beat on the closed womb of his unwed mother. Then, a hot one, even before birth, he shook his light wings, and with a thumbling push opened the gates of birth. So then with the translation in B, which is nota bene, in this passage, Aphrodite is born pregnant with Eros, who she births on the day of her own birth. So she is alive. She comes out already fully formed. And then within her lives Eros until he's born. So, backing up, this tells us that it was not Cyprus, or Kythera that Aphrodite is from, but instead that she is from Beirut, that she was born of the sea. She came to Beirut first. And then, walking upon the land itself sprouted plants, grass, so much so that the road became ruddy with clumps of roses. I mean, that is simply remarkable. So, another origin, and then as well as, explaining where Eros came from. So, Eros did not, in this myth, exist before Aphrodite. All right. So that's enough for the myths for now. But I want to point out right before we move on to the next slide. So it talks about Ouranos, his genitalia bringing fertility to the ocean, and then that mixing and becoming Aphrodite, with nature being the midwife. So nature is the one who oversaw that, making sure everything was in place, as you would think of a midwife. So, interesting thought that nature itself would guide the formation of life from a heavenly body that fell into the sea and became love and procreation. Interesting. All right, next. So to cross-reference some of the stuff, so the words Kypros, Kypris, Kyprogenes happens 13 times among these myths. Kythera, Kytheria happen 5 times. The word sea is mentioned 22 times, so we can clearly see that there is a correlation to the word sea. Eros, love, Cupid is mentioned 7 times. Hieromos, desire, is mentioned only 4 times. And where'd she come from? Where's the origins, and where is she traveling to? Well, many of them mention her traveling or coming to or from east to west. There's 3 of them. West to east, there's 2 of them. Ones that mention Cyprus being her birthplace, there's 3. There's really only one that mentions Kythera being her actual birthplace, and then there's one that mentions Beirut being her birthplace. So here we have a map. The yellow pins here, they are, well, the one on the right is Beirut in Lebanon. The one near the middle is Cyprus, and the one on the far left is Kythera. Now, if you draw a straight line from Kythera straight over to Cyprus, what you're going to wind up with is this island right here. Well, that island, my friends, is Rhodes. So to get from Cyprus to Cythera, or vice versa, you would probably go past Rhodes. So that's Rhodes. That's the island where they didn't allow her to anchor. So where'd she come from? Well, there's two basic trains of thought. You have the Near Eastern tradition, or which is what is the predominant one, the quote unquote traditional one at the moment, and then there's the Proto-Indo-European. So with the traditional Near East model, basically she is an amalgam of several other more ancient gods, or well, goddesses, starting with Ishtar and Inanna. So Ishtar would be Mesopotamian. It's what the Eastern Semitic language would refer to her as. And then you have Inanna, which is Sumerian. And something very interesting that, the word Inanna, the name Inanna is a goddess. In Hebrew, Inini or Inene means I am here. So I don't know if there's necessarily a linguistic connection there or not, but I think that's kind of cool. Meaning not just that I am present, but I am physically, spiritually all here, engaged. Astarte, that is the Phoenician goddess, which would have been derived from Ishtar, Inanna, and the Phoenicians left the Levant, cut across the Mediterranean to Cyprus, where they landed. There were a couple different settlements on Cyprus, but Paphos was the main center of worship for Aphrodite. From there, it would have spread across the Mediterranean to quite possibly Cythera, and then into the Peloponnesian mainland of Greece. So, what does that mean? Well, that would basically mean that Aphrodite comes from a Semitic tradition. So that's kind of interesting. There are other goddesses such as Hecate, and I think Athena as well, and Dionysus, who are postulated as coming from the Near East as well, and having similar origins. The Proto-Indo-European theory, it seems a little bit more out there, but at the same time, it seems to fit. Now, I say it's a little bit more out there simply because Proto-Indo-European is a long time ago, like a really long time ago. So I'm not sure what our sources are for this, but anyway, you can check it out, do some more research if you would like. Probably will do a lecture on this at some point. So, it basically, there's a goddess, a dawn goddess, who is Eos in Greek, Aurora in Latin, and Ushas in Sanskrit. So, this dawn goddess, she, like Aphrodite, she has a very aggressive sexuality to her. She is known for her erotic beauty. And in a kind of parallel myth, you have the sky god Indra defeating the obstacle or opponent god, who is the personification of drought. So we got the water there, right? He defeats Vrtra, and thus creates Ushas, or at the very least liberates her, or allows her to be free. So we have those parallels, and there's other parallels as well. Ushas is she's a dawn goddess. What are dawns? Dawns are golden. They're radiant. They're heavenly. Well, those are all things that Aphrodite is described as being. She is Uranos, or Urana. She is heavenly. I don't remember what the Greek is for radiant, but she's also known as being radiant. She's known as being golden. I don't know if she has of the dawn or dawn is a title of hers. It might be, but I'm not 100% sure. But at any rate, you have a very strong parallel. And while it's not widely accepted, there are some people who still think that it's possible. So we have one tradition where it's coming from the Near East, traveling west into the Greek civilization and Western civilization. And then you have one that's like, well, no, it didn't come from the Near East. Um, it actually came from the Proto Indo Europeans, um, which would be partly the people who would become Western civilization. So you have the Near East versus Western civilization. Um, I kind of feel like, why wouldn't you have it going both ways? Why does it have to be just one way? I mean, if you look at Egypt, when the Greeks and then the Romans and the Ptolemies and the Alexander the Great and all those guys, they actually created a whole separate pantheon of an amalgam between the Roman gods, the Greek gods, which the Romans and the Greeks are really the same people, kind of, um, and mix them with the Egyptian gods, so that they could have, a common and not really ancestor, but a common symbol of worship, essentially. So, I don't see why things couldn't go both ways. I know, from studying this, that Isis was very big, worshipped in Egypt, and then she jumped the Mediterranean into Greece and into Rome, Italy. So, I don't see why these two theories have to compete. But at any rate, that's what I got here. So I lied. I got one last myth. This one's different, though. This one, I think, is a little bit later. Um, so in the Iliad, Book 5, it is shown that Aphrodite is the daughter of Zeus. Zeus is, in fact, her father. And then her mother is Dione. Dione is depicted in different myths as being different things. Sometimes she's a Titaness. But in the Iliad, she consoles Aphrodite. Aphrodite goes into battle. She gets wounded. Don't ask me how that's possible. It just how they wrote it. And so she goes back to Dione and she gets consoled. Now, Zeus is the king of the gods. And for someone to call a king father, that's not really that big of a stretch. Dione is thought to be a derivative of the name Zeus. So, what you do with that, I don't really know. No clue. Zeus, like some other gods, male gods, have given birth, such as with Athena. Athena sprouted from Zeus's head, fully armored and armed. So maybe they're saying that, he is her father because he accepted her into the realms of Olympus. Maybe? I don't know. That is just kind of my thoughts. Anyway, in Book 5, she is shown to be bad in battle. She is inept. She cannot fight. And that is despite one of her titles being Aria, which means warlike. And that's why it looks a lot like the name Ares. It's meant to. She was worshipped as Aria and even shown as armored in Kythera as well as in Sparta. And we think that's probably one of the oldest depictions of her, that she is, in fact, a goddess of love and peace and procreation. You could really make the argument she's the goddess of civilization, because you're going to have all of those things for civilization to take hold. So she is shown as being armored clad. So why is she, why is she bad? Well, one theory is that this was written or edited perhaps by Ionian influences, and you have the Heptanes, who have their interpretation of the quote-unquote correct version of Aphrodite, versus the Peloponnese, um, so a different side of Greece, having their version of the goddess. So it's very possible that this was one of the later myths. Aphrodite had been accepted as an Olympian, therefore Zeus was her dad. And now that we already have Athena being the goddess of wisdom and of war, we don't need another goddess of war. So the gods in Greek mythology, they tend to stick to their lanes very strictly, lest they become jealous of one another and just stop being godly and stop doing their job. So, yeah. That's all I got for you here, guys. We are just over 50 minutes now, and thanks if you've made it this far to the end. Thank you very much for listening to what I had to say. I hope you found it thought-provoking. I hope you found it useful. There's a lot of resources online. Theo.com is one of the big ones that I've used. I know people are like Wikipedia, but you don't necessarily have to use Wikipedia. You can go to Wikipedia and use the sources there. And the one on the article on Aphrodite is cited out the wazoo. There's over 100 citations on that thing. So that's what I've been using as my sources. And this is our first lecture, and I will, if time permits and my work schedule allows, hopefully we will be doing more of these kind of long form lectures, and this will also kind of roll into our seminary program. Once we get a community and we get people who want to do this sort of thing, we'll use this to then teach people. But for now, it's just our community outreach, letting people know a little bit more of the history, a little bit more of the mythology, and a little bit more of the theology behind what it is that we do and how we feel and we believe. So, until next time, everyone, blessed be.